Hello and welcome to our latest breaking news. Here are the detailed headlines. Please stay tuned. Trump is stuck in a dangerous strait. Either defeat Iran or pay the price. The military adventure in Iran is putting President Trump in a difficult position. Either achieve a clear victory or face major political risks before the midterm elections and domestic economic pressure. According to a commentary by the World Trade Channel, with the U.S. midterm elections approaching, President Donald Trump is facing a dangerous strait both literally and figuratively. Military decisions in Iran not only affect global security but also directly impact the Republican Party's political standing. The World Channel notes that Republican members are exerting strong pressure, forcing President Trump to end the war. The reason given is the American people's limited tolerance for prolonged conflict. The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz not only increases oil prices but also leads to escalating costs for gasoline, jet fuel, heating, and fertilizer. Public discontent over the economy is a major risk. Experts warn that every additional day of fighting is another day Mr. Trump misses the opportunity to promote his domestic achievements regarding energy, deregulation, and tax cuts. Polls show that the political weight is bearing down on the Republican Party ahead of the midterms. According to a recent nationwide NBC News poll, a majority of respondents disapprove of Mr. Trump's actions regarding Iran. Additionally, 50% of registered voters said they want the Democratic Party to gain control of Congress this fall. NBC News notes that Americans have expressed anger over high gas prices, as polls show voters are dissatisfied with how Mr. Trump is handling the economy. However, experts point out that how the conflict ends is more important than when it ends. The chaotic ceasefire this week is being seen as a political liability as Iran maintains control over the Strait of Hormuz. This creates opportunities for the Democratic Party and the media to attack. Politico mocked that the campaign seems to be failing, while the Washington Post asserted that Mr. Trump's core objectives have not yet been achieved. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer stated that this war has left us worse off than when it started. Anti-war Republicans also oddly joined in, declaring that Iran is now an even greater challenge and evidence that U.S. foreign intervention is always a costly mistake. According to Juan Scher, Americans may be divided by party, but they share one common trait: they hate losing. A chaotic, failed outcome would be a major grievance for voters, compounding existing economic frustrations. After weeks of escalating tensions, the prolonged strained developments between the U.S. and Iran recently show that the strategic situation is undergoing notable changes, with both sides suffering losses and adjusting their approaches. Observers note that while Iran has suffered significant capability losses, it still maintains the ability to exert pressure at several key points. Conversely, the U.S. also faces pressure regarding costs and resource allocation in the context of a prolonged situation. Pakistan speaks out after U.S.-Iran talks collapse. What message was sent? Direct talks between the U.S. and Iran in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, ended after 21 hours of work without reaching an agreement, as deep-seated differences persist between the two sides. Meanwhile, according to Al Jazeera, Pakistani Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar issued a statement on the talks, saying it is essential that the parties continue to maintain their commitment to the ceasefire agreement. Mr. Dar said that he, along with General Asim Munir, Pakistan's Army Chief of Staff, facilitated several intense but constructive rounds of negotiations between the two sides. Mr. Dar stated, "We hope the two sides will continue in a positive spirit to achieve lasting peace and prosperity for the entire region and beyond." Mr. Dar said Pakistan will continue to play its role in promoting exchanges and dialogue between Iran and the U.S. in the coming days. Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister also expressed gratitude to both sides for acknowledging Pakistan's efforts in helping reach a ceasefire agreement, while expressing hope that both parties would maintain a positive spirit to achieve long-term peace. He stated, according to a Foreign Ministry declaration, that Pakistan has and will continue to play a role in facilitating exchanges and dialogue between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America in the coming days. Talks collapse. Mr. J.D. Vance calls it bad news after 20 hours of negotiation. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance confirmed that the U.S. and Iran did not reach any agreement following the recent talks in Pakistan. Mr. Vance said, "We're coming back to the U.S. without a deal. We laid out our red lines clearly, what we're willing to give, what we're not willing to give. We said it as clearly as we possibly could, and they chose not to accept our terms." The U.S. Vice President also stated that he communicated continuously with President Donald Trump throughout the trilateral negotiations with Iran and Pakistan. Mr. Vance said, "We were in constant contact with the president. I don't know how many times we spoke, maybe half a dozen, maybe a dozen times over the past 21 hours. He also said he spoke with several other senior U.S. officials during the negotiation process, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent, and Admiral Brad Cooper from U.S. Central Command. He stated, "We kept in constant contact with the whole team because we were negotiating in good faith." When asked which terms Iran rejected, Mr. Vance said simply that the U.S. needs to see a clear commitment that they will not pursue nuclear weapons or the tools to quickly acquire them. He continued, "The question is, do we see a foundational commitment from Iran that they will not develop nuclear weapons, not just now, not just for 2 years, but for the long term? To this point, we haven't seen that, but we hope we will." Vice President Vance stated that the U.S. made a final and best offer to Iran, while affirming that Washington showed flexibility in the negotiations. But Iran refused to accept the conditions. He said, "We were very good faith. The president told us, go in there with a serious intent and maximum effort to get a deal. We did that, but unfortunately, we couldn't make any progress." Mr. Vance believes the main sticking point is Iran's refusal to abandon its nuclear program. Mr. Vance said the U.S. needs Iran to commit not to develop nuclear weapons long-term nor pursue the tools that would allow Iran to quickly obtain them. He stated that the U.S. made what was considered its best offer. Therefore, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance emphasized, "The bad news is we didn't get a deal. I think that's worse news for Iran than it is for the U.S." Iran has not yet responded to Mr. J.D. Vance's statements. U.S. and Iran end first round of talks, move to expert level. Negotiations between the U.S. and Iran tentatively ended in the early morning of April 12 and were expected to resume later in the day. In a post on social media platform X, the Iranian government said that after nearly 15 hours, the talks had ended and technical experts from both sides would exchange documents. According to an Iranian government announcement, the talks between Iran and the U.S. entered a specialized phase, where committees on economic, military, legal, and nuclear issues met. The announcement added that negotiations continued to finalize technical details. Over 15 hours, Pakistan convinced both sides that concessions were needed to achieve what they wanted. Therefore, the negotiation process continuously ebbed and flowed, sometimes advancing, sometimes retreating. Iranian sources said they are willing to negotiate but consider U.S. demands excessive. The U.S. side affirmed that if the Strait of Hormuz is not reopened, making progress would be very difficult. Iran demands that the U.S. and Israel stop attacks, compensate for previous damages, and guarantee no new attacks. Tehran also wants U.S. military forces to withdraw from the region. Additionally, Iran demands the lifting of years-long sanctions. However, the fact that the parties continue dialogue, now entering a fifth round, along with the exchange of multiple draft documents, communication with higher-ups, and the additional appearance of Iranian aircraft, suggests some positive signs of progress. Therefore, official sources maintain expectations. Currently, there is effectively a gag order on Pakistani officials. The host country does not want to create additional pressure or affect the process, leaving the parties to decide based on their own conditions. Pakistan deploys fighter jets to the Middle East. The Saudi Arabian Defense Ministry said Pakistani fighter jets and support aircraft had arrived at King Abdulaziz Air Base in the country's eastern province. The deployment of Pakistani forces to Saudi Arabia aims to enhance joint defense cooperation and support regional and international security and stability. Sources from Pakistan and the region say the movement of Pakistani military equipment occurred after key Saudi energy infrastructure was attacked by Iran. This is a reassuring move by Pakistan towards its Saudi partner against any future external attacks. The Saudi Defense Ministry said Pakistani fighter jets and support aircraft arrived at King Abdulaziz Air Base in the east of the country. The deployment will help enhance joint defense cooperation, support security, and maintain regional and international stability. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed a joint defense treaty in September 2025, stating that both sides would consider any act of aggression against one as an attack against both. The treaty has significantly deepened the decades-long security partnership between the two countries. This deployment follows a series of Iranian attacks on Gulf states in retaliation for U.S. and Israeli military campaigns. Pakistan has long provided military support to Saudi Arabia, including training and advisory activities, while Saudi Arabia has repeatedly intervened to provide financial support to Pakistan during difficult economic times. Saudi Finance Minister Mohammed Al-Jadaan has also visited Pakistan to demonstrate economic support for the country. Expert says Iran holds many cards, while Trump remains calm, attending a fight event. William Weschler, director of the Middle East program at the Atlantic Council and former senior Pentagon official, assessed that Mr. Trump backed down first. Now, Iran will not accept any deal unless Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance abandon core U.S. national security interests in the Middle East. Unlike the U.S. and the rest of the world, Iran's leadership can prolong negotiations while stubbornly holding on to its demands. Additionally, veteran U.S. State Department Middle East negotiator Aaron David Miller believes Iran holds more advantages than the U.S. after the two sides ended 21 hours of talks without a deal. Mr. Miller told CNN, Tehran seems to be pursuing a slower pace than Washington. Iran is clearly in no hurry to concede. In my view, they still hold a stockpile of highly enriched uranium. They have demonstrated geographical weaponization capability, control, and coordination of the Strait of Hormuz. Their government remains standing. They have shown a frightening ability to undermine security and stability. All these factors are cards they hold. He added, Mr. Miller believes Iran would rather risk the resumption of U.S. and Israeli airstrikes than leave the negotiating table empty-handed. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump attended a UFC mixed martial arts event in Miami, Florida, while over 12 hours of direct U.S.-Iran talks were taking place in Pakistan. In the stands in Miami, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was seen leaning in and whispering to Mr. Trump, according to accompanying reporters and video from the event. Immediately after, Mr. Trump turned to the audience behind him, pumped his fist, and smiled in the energetic atmosphere of the fight. Before leaving Washington, Mr. Trump briefly told reporters that the outcome of the negotiations didn't mean much to him, regardless of whether the U.S. and Iran reached a deal. U.S. releases Iranian assets in Qatar, but talks in Pakistan remain deadlocked. A senior Iranian source said the U.S. agreed to release Tehran's frozen assets in Qatar and some foreign banks. This move occurred as the two sides entered an important round of negotiations in Islamabad, Pakistan. According to Reuters, the source assessed that this move shows Washington is demonstrating seriousness in seeking a deal with Tehran. Accordingly, the asset unfreezing is directly related to the commitment to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the core topics on the negotiating table. Another Iranian source said the U.S. agreed to release about $6 billion of its assets held in Qatar. However, the U.S. side has not yet provided any official confirmation, while the Qatari Foreign Ministry has also not responded to requests for comment. Meanwhile, senior U.S. and Iranian delegations arrived in Pakistan to resume dialogue after a 6-week-long conflict. But the prospect of a breakthrough remains open as disagreements over Lebanon, sanctions, and regional security remain unresolved. Senior U.S. and Iranian officials were present in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, for talks aimed at ending the over-month-long conflict between them. However, the dialogue process faced many obstacles from the start, as Tehran set preconditions related to sanctions and the situation in Lebanon. This is considered the highest-level contact between the two countries since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, and could potentially become the first direct talks since the 2015 nuclear deal. Nevertheless, Tehran stated that negotiations cannot begin unless Washington fulfills commitments, including easing sanctions and promoting a ceasefire in Lebanon, where fighting between Israel and Hezbollah continues. Iran accuses U.S. of unreasonable demands. Tehran residents disappointed as peace talks with U.S. and Israel hit dead end. Esmail Khani, commander of the Quds Force of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, declared that the resistance front is stronger and more united than ever. According to Mr. Khani, Israel believes that by applying pressure, it can weaken and make Iran surrender. But the spirit of resistance is that the more pressure we endure, the stronger and more steadfast we become. Iranian state media believes that U.S. demands prevented reaching a common framework and agreement after the Islamabad talks yielded no results. Tasnim news agency, quoting a correspondent in Islamabad, said the talks between the Iranian and U.S. delegations ended moments ago, and due to what was described as U.S. excess and ambition, the two sides have so far been unable to reach an agreement. Fars news agency reported that the prospect of reaching a deal depends on the U.S. changing its unreasonable demands. Among them, the Strait of Hormuz issue remains one of the unresolved points of contention. According to this source, experts from both sides are trying to find common ground, while the Pakistani mediator is reportedly actively narrowing differences and bringing viewpoints closer. The two negotiating teams also temporarily withdrew to consult with expert groups on draft proposals and are expected to resume talks after the options are finalized. Many Iranian citizens took to social media and messaged each other expressing concern after Mr. Vance announced no deal was reached. Many closely followed the negotiation developments, hoping for a diplomatic breakthrough to end the fighting and pave the way for sanction relief. Amir Hossein, a Tehran resident, wrote in a text message, "God help us. Maybe this means we're back to war." Conservative analyst Ali Ganhaki, close to the Iranian government, said on social media that the talks failed because the U.S. demanded no uranium enrichment, the removal of nearly 400 kilograms of Iran's uranium stockpile, and added new demands regarding the U.S. managing Strait of Hormuz security on its own terms. Mr. Ganhaki also said the U.S. made no commitments regarding ending Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon. He stated, "It seems the U.S. and Iran won't reach an agreement.